Perfect. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. We'll be talking about the power of eating. And so this will be presented by the Sugar Club here at Dr. Curnew's Cardiology Clinic. And we are the club that kind of focuses on diabetes and diabetes remission. So we just wanted to start off by saying that it was Dr. Curnew's birthday this weekend. And so I just wanted to wish him a happy birthday. He is a little busy right now, running a little bit at the clinic. And so we'll be able to give him a nice wish once he joins. Perfect. All righty. So one of the things that we just wanted to kind of talk about here today is just like the importance of medications. So it's just nice to see here an image of Dr. Curnew with all these medications that he's taking, and on the right there we do have vitamins, and something we just wanted to talk about a little bit before we get started is just on the next slide. Vitamins, although sometimes can be helpful, sometimes it's always good to not just fall into the trap of getting all these extra types of vitamins. It's only nice to supplement yourself with the vitamins if there is an actual need. So I'll give you an example.
Hold on for a second here. You're saying that vitamins. So you go back to that one slide there.
Sure.
So you can see over here we have some vitamins for people age of 50. There's some things. So if you look carefully, the two things that work in that repertoire are cholesterol pills, either Crestor, Lipitor, and ezetimibe. If you take high dose of those two medications, you lower your risk of heart disease. Mm-hmm. All the other vitamins on the other left is a multi-billion-dollar industry, which is totally useless. So I'm just totally amazed what people take or don't take. And yes, if you're vitamin B12 deficient, you should take it. But for most people, vitamins give you a lousy sense of protection. And the best vitamin is vitamin E, which is vitamin exercise, and vitamin D, which is vitamin diet. So those are the things that I would think about a little bit more carefully. Tell us more.
Yes, exactly. And so just on that, here, if you look at the right there, you can actually see a couple of different types of studies that have kind of and what they've shown. And so here we can see the first one, selenium and vitamin E, an increased risk of prostate cancer is what they found. Or just like a daily dose of vitamin E, they found an increased risk of heart failure. And so we can see that the vitamin industry really can be, just that it's just a money-making business in some cases, especially if you're already a healthy person. I'll give you an example. So for me, I do take vitamin B12 because my doctor told me to do so because I'm vegetarian. So maybe that's like an example of a situation where, the vitamin supplementation is good for you. But before you do make the choice, it's just nice to see what your doctor has to say and whether, to realize that these vitamins are the right fit for you or not. Awesome. So here we have Dr. Curnew and various activities here. Dr. Curnew, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we can see in this slide?
Okay, well, you can see that you mentioned my vitamins are, I get the other vitamin D from sunlight. So I picked up a new sport called plane gliding. I'm a lousy plane glider. I'm at 50 flights. I have an instructor and I'm learning how to do that. And it's like anything, it just takes time, practice, and effort. On your right, you can see three people that have done these many triathlons. There's my wife on the far left. She places the number 2 or number 3 in that race. She placed number 3 in her age group. I finished the third bottomest in my age group. And so at least we're playing there. And this is last weekend, Labor Day weekend, where I visited my sister and paddleboarding and enjoy being outside in some form of activity. So please find the time to be with the people that you care about the most, spend time activity-wise, and get your vitamin L, which is vitamin love, from the people that love you, and you can love them. And there's also vitamin brain, vitamin B, and that's basically train your brain, try to learn some new activities. And you can see vitamin E is vitamin exercise. So those are some of the things that you should be thinking about.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
And here's one that you should not be thinking about: alcohol. And I guess, Nabila, do you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, for sure. So just shifting gears a little bit, talking about avoiding alcohol use. So in the context of diabetes, alcohol consumption can worsen diabetes-related medical complications. And as you can see from the slide here, some of the risks associated with alcohol consumption for people with diabetes include providing just empty calories that can lead to weight gain if taken in excess, increased blood pressure and triglycerides. It can damage your liver and nerves, including your brain and sexual organs, contribute to inflammation of the pancreas. It can dehydrate the body, which is very dangerous in someone with high blood sugar. So people with type 1 diabetes should be aware that moderate consumption of alcohol with or 2 to 3 hours after an evening meal can result in delayed low blood sugar, so hypoglycemia the next morning after breakfast, or up to 24 hours after alcohol consumption. So this also applies to people with type 2 diabetes who are using insulin.
So today what we'll be talking about is mainly the other type of vitamin D, so vitamin diet.
Can you just back up
So
one more slide again?
yeah, for sure.
So just this week, there's been a lot of brand new information about alcohol. Basically, alcohol, unfortunately, is considered a carcinogen. It causes 6 cancers. It's associated with weight gain, diabetes, atrial fibrillation, Alzheimer's disease, cardiomyopathy, just to name a few. So the recommendation, the safe amount of alcohol, unfortunately, is no alcohol. That's annoying because I think many of us enjoy drinking. I think if you want to be careful about this, is that 2 drinks a week or less would be the maximum for most people. And unfortunately, there's no safe amount of alcohol anymore. That's the news. And so sorry to say that, but something to think about.
For sure. And what we'll get into today is just talking a little bit more about what we can do, especially with our eating. So we'll start with fiber, and I believe we'll have somebody start and take us over. I'll pass it off to you, Nisa.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
sorry, see you on. Yeah.
no worries, no worries. So the next topic that we have is fiber, and of course, by being in the Sugar Club, we've talked about fiber quite a lot and how it contributes to the GI system. We're gonna go over more about it. So first off, what exactly is fiber? Fiber is a nutrient that our body actually cannot digest, and there turns out to be 2 types of fiber: the soluble fiber and the insoluble one. Examples of soluble fiber includes tofu, avocado, oranges, and then examples of insoluble fibers include red beans, nuts, apples, and green beans. Functions of fiber mainly are regulation of the body's use of sugar, because soluble fiber is capable of inhibiting a few nutrients, including glucose or cholesterol, if they're taken in excess. Fiber is also capable of regulating the amount of food intake, because fiber tend to take a longer time to be processed in the stomach. It makes us feel full and makes us not want to eat as much compared to if we're eating the same amount of other nutrients such as proteins or other types of carbohydrates. Fiber also has the ability to keep the digestive system healthy. Because fiber is not fully digestible, a lot of it really gets stored in our GI tract, which in essence is just a tube. So because you can't fully digest it, it moves down your GI tract, and fiber is a huge force of keeping things in the GI tract moving, and it's one of the things that really just pushes things out to ensure that your digestive system is healthy and clean. So if fiber is such a good thing, then how much should we eat? And the nutrition amount that is recommended for women is 21 to 25 grams per day, and the one that's recommended for men is actually 30 to 38 grams per day. And to kind of give you an idea as to how much that is, I've put this diagram on the right side of the PowerPoint that indicates how much fiber you're getting from the amount that's listed on the screen. So for example, half of the avocado gives you 7 grams of fiber. So for your references later, if you want to check, feel free to go back to the slide. So we've talked about how fiber can be a really good thing. So does that mean we should always eat a lot of it? Not necessarily. We should eat approximately the right amount of fiber. So the amount that we listed on, so that's around 30 grams of fiber. If you have too much fiber, there's a lot of different symptoms and conditions that we might be diagnosed with, such as just not feeling comfortable, bloating, having abdominal pain, temporary weight gain. And you might also experience constipation or diarrhea if you get too much fiber. And this is kind of interesting because if you're eating too much fiber, there's two different possible situations. The first one being how fiber really just moves down the GI tract, the digestive tube way too fast, and it pushes everything out, leading to diarrhea, or it clumps together somehow in the GI tract, and it's just too big to move around, and that leads to constipation. If you have other diseases such as Crohn's disease, or if you're in diabetes, you should also be careful to not eat way too much fiber because too much fiber leads to intestinal blockage with people with Crohn's disease, and if you have diabetes, that may lead to reduced blood sugar levels. If you have not enough fiber, on the other hand, that may lead to irregular bowel movement, that may lead to constipation. It may also lead to blood sugar fluctuations or rises in the cholesterol level, as we talked about how soluble fiber is capable of taking up excess amount of these nutrients. So if they're not eating enough, that leads to fluctuations in these two categories, which is not good. And lastly, not enough fiber also leads to lack of satiety, as we've just talked about. So improper amounts of fiber, it brings a lot of benefits, and we kind of want to focus on two main benefits, being the digestive benefits and how it relates with diabetes, as well as impacts on cardiovascular diseases. So in terms of digestive benefits, it prevents constipation, it promotes bowel movement, lowers blood cholesterol levels, regulates blood glucose levels. And by doing all of these, we're achieving a healthier body weight. And and if you are a patient with diabetes, this also improves insulin resistance. In terms of impacts with cardiovascular disease, because you're taking in the excess cholesterol by eating fiber, this is reducing the lipoprotein cholesterol concentrations in your blood. So this at the end really prevents plaque buildup in blood vessels, and this can help to improve cardiovascular conditions with typically with everyone.
So now we're going to move on, and we're going to get a bit broader here and touch upon like carbohydrates. So carbohydrates can affect your blood sugar, but it is a myth that people with diabetes should completely refrain from consuming any carbs. The type and amount of carbohydrates you eat is what matters. So just to start off, what are carbohydrates? So when you think of carbs, most people think about sugars, but carbs also include starches and valuable fibers, which are found in many nutrient-rich foods that should be a part of your diet. So one way that carbs are classified is by the terms of simple and complex. So complex carbs are carbs found in whole unprocessed foods, including fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. When comparing the two, we can think of simple carbs as sugars. So simple carbs are made up of shorter chains of molecules and are quicker to digest than complex carbs. So consequently, simple carbs produce a spike in blood glucose, providing the body with a short-lasting source of energy. So the initial spike in energy is responsible for the sugar rush that people have associated with the consumption of certain simple carbs, such as chocolate bars or sugary drinks. So contrasting this to complex carbs contain longer chains of sugar molecules than simple carbs. So the body converts these sugar molecules into glucose, which it uses for energy. And as complex carbs have longer chains, they take longer to break down and provide more longer lasting energy in the body than simple carbs. So complex carbs raise blood glucose levels for longer and produce a more lasting elevation in energy. The primary function of carbs is overall to provide the body with energy, and complex carbs basically do this in a more effective manner. So considering the type of foods containing carbohydrates is important, however. So some simple carbs are present in nutritious foods such as milk and whole fruits that contain a variety of necessary vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. but some simple carbs are also present in foods with low nutritional values, such as sugary drinks. So complex carbs are also available in processed foods without much nutrition, such as refined white flour. However, many other complex carbs are in more nutritious foods, so it's important to be mindful of this. And then on this slide, you can see some examples of simple carbs to avoid. So that this includes sodas, baked goods, fruit juice concentrate, breakfast cereals and dairy products. And then complex carbs to consider include whole grains such as brown rice and oatmeal, grain foods such as quinoa, beans and legumes like lentils, kidney beans and chickpeas, and other fibrous foods. So fiber is a type of complex carb and a constituent of many plant-based foods. And as we talked about earlier, fiber is necessary for keeping the digestive system healthy. So while complex carbs are a better source of energy than simple ones, they're not necessarily a healthier option. So some forms of simple carbs are healthier than some complex carbs. Therefore, it's important to consider the overall nutritional profile of each food you want to consume instead of focusing on a single nutrient. So now just going over counting carbs. Carbs are measured in grams. On packaged foods, you can find total carb grams on the nutritional facts label. So you can also cross-reference this using other sources or even a carb counting app to find the grams of carbs in your foods and drinks. So according to Diabetes Canada, 1 carb serving is about 15 grams of carbs. This isn't always the same as what you think of as a serving of food. Just to put this into context, for example, most people would count a small baked potato as 1 serving. However, at about 30 grams of carbs, it actually counts as 2 carb servings. So try to eat about the same amount of carbs at each meal to keep your blood sugar levels steady throughout the day. Counting carbs by keeping track of the carbs in all your meals, snacks, and drinks can help you match your activity level to the food you eat. So you can count carbs to make managing blood sugar easier. And some apps to consider using to help facilitate this process can include MyFitnessPal, Daily Carb Pro, Carb Manager, Keto Diet app. And these apps are a great way to stay accountable and on track for your daily net carb intake, fat, protein, and just calorie breakdown for specific foods you're consuming.
Yeah, for sure. So now that you guys touched over carbs and fiber, we're kind of going to look over meal planning, because meal planning can be a really great strategy for those who cook at home. So we're going to start off with a little meal planning 101. So what is it and why is it important? So meal planning really is an effective way to take control of your eating habits. And as we know, when you take control of your eating habits, you're ultimately taking care of your overall health. So with meal planning, you can build a menu that will really help you meet your personalized nutritional needs. And it does involve dedicating a portion of time. So for example, you can set aside a weekend, like a portion of your weekend, like Saturday morning or afternoon, to creating a menu, buying ingredients, and preparing food that will last you the whole week. And a lot of athletes actually follow like a structured meal plan to ensure they are consuming like a very nutritional, satisfying diet. But individuals with prediabetes, diabetes, and other illnesses can also benefit from meal planning a lot, just because it helps you get a really great control over your diet. And by planning meals, you can really reduce your temptation to unhealthy foods, which can help you lower blood sugar levels and lose weight and improve the result of your lipid panels. Because if you have a meal in the fridge prepared in a little container to go, you're a lot less likely to reach for something that might not be as good for you. So it's great to, if you're wanting to reduce temptation, and also if you want to stick to a budget-friendly option, since one of the objectives of meal planning is definitely to stick with a more pre-planned grocery list rather than kind of just choosing random objects off the shelf that you can't always make into a meal. So to kind of confirm the positive effects of meal planning is actually even a habit that's endorsed by the Government of Canada's Food Literacy Program. So the Government of Canada literally says that having this meal planning is one of the 4 skills of being having good food literacy. So it really is an important skill that can greatly benefit you from day to day. And diet is a large factor in your health, of course, as it does have the power to prevent and stabilize some illnesses. So staying in control of your diet, once again, just really means you're controlling your health. So for example, if you're diabetic and you decide to do a meal plan that focuses on foods which are low on the glycemic index, you'll have much better control of your diet rather than picking random foods at random times of the day, which can lead to excessive like glucose sugar spikes. So this can really reduce your risk of diabetic complications, as your sugar will be more likely to be in the normal range more often. And it can also help you kind of overcome some of those mental hurdles that might accompany going on a diet. So if you were considering going on a diet, it can be really tempting to go and grab something. But if you sit down once a week and you really plan out your meals and you take control in that way, it's very motivating, and it can really help you have a lot less temptation and overcome some of those mental hurdles. And just to back some of this up with some research, there was a study that was published pretty recently in 2018 that observed patients who followed a hypocaloric, nutritionally complete, and high protein meal plan for 6 months. And the original objective of this study was to see if this could improve with mobility. But what they really found was that this study saw clinically significant weight loss in a lot of the people who were participants in the study, and their lean mass was greatly preserved. So following this meal plan was a really great way for them to be motivated and lose weight without having to suffer as much as you might just doing a normal diet and not having some food ready to go for you when you get tempted. So there are definitely a couple of steps that are important to follow when you're meal planning, and obviously you can follow these in a more flexible manner as well, just depending on your day-to-day lifestyle. But I would say that the first step is definitely to set an objective. So what is your main goal from meal planning? Are you trying to lose weight, lower your blood sugar, improve your lipid panels? Whatever way that you decide to guide your meal plan will greatly affect the direction and help you come up with right choices that will suit your personalized needs. So if somebody's trying to lose weight, that might look a little bit different in their meal plan, and that will really help you by just knowing what your goal is. Another tip is to find reasonable appetizing recipes. So with meal planning, you're typically making food for multiple days instead of just one day. So you might make food for 3 to 4 days. And I think with that, it's important to find something that you're going to want to eat every day for a few days, just because you want to make sure that when you're going to the fridge to grab that meal, you do still think it's appetizing. And I think a really great way to find recipes that might suit your objective is to check out MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal, a lot of users on there post their own recipes, so they are kind of like a home cooked recipe instead of really looking more like a dieting website, even though it is meant for counting calories and everything. A lot of the recipes on there are really healthy, and they look pretty satisfying as well. So if you're considering making a meal plan, I would definitely check out that website. And it's great because a lot of the recipes on MyFitnessPal also have all of the nutritional information listed. So that's super helpful when creating a meal plan. Making a manageable list will be important as well. So sort through your list and make sure you are focused on like buying the right ingredients, the necessary ingredients, and try to go shopping when you're not too hungry, because you don't want to over shop and do impulse shopping at all. And if you need help with your meal plan, you can also collaborate on your meal plan with a friend or family member, and you guys can work on this together and make a more manageable list, because it can sometimes be overwhelming at first to try something new, but meal planning is definitely an investment for your time as well as your health. So it's a great strategy. And finally is just scheduling in the time. And I think when scheduling in the time to meal plan, it's important to kind of look at this time as self-care time and time that you are spending to improve your health and care for yourself. Because although it may seem like a bit of a chore, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of time throughout the week. You won't have to cook as much throughout the week, and you will be working towards improving your health, which is always great. So just make sure to be motivated when you're meal planning, and it really is a great strategy if you're trying to try it out for the first time.
Perfect. Now we'll go into something very actionable. It's going to be just portion control. And so we're going to try to figure out what portion control is and how we can kind of use that when we, meal plan, or when we take into things like fiber into account or carbs into account. And so the first thing that we want to think about is just water. Sometimes our brain will misunderstand thirst and hunger. And sometimes even when we're hungry, just drinking water can fulfill that. But in this case, what I wanted to focus on was that a trick you can use to feel full faster is to kind of stockpile on water. And so they did a couple of studies here. One of them, what they did is the participants in the study, they drank 500 milliliters of water, which is about half of this water bottle, a little bit less than half of this water bottle, right before they ate a meal. And it was usually 30 minutes before eating the meal, actually. And they found that folks that actually drank that 500 milliliters of water lost on average 44% more weight over 3 months compared to people who didn't drink that water. And when we now look at just people that were overweight and obese, they found that drinking 500 milliliters of water 30 minutes before a meal helped those participants kind of reduce their intake of calories by over 10%. I think it was 13%. And so 13% less calories without making really any changes. It's just, you just feel full faster. The other one there is just called being present. And so what I mean by being present is just knowing that when you distract yourself with things like TV, you might not tend to notice your hunger kind of going away. And so you might start overeating, especially if it's like a mind-numbing activity like that. The other side is eating slower. And so when we are more conscious of what we eat, and when we start eating a bit slower, we actually give our brain the time to process what's going on. And so our brain usually takes, I think it's like 15 to 20 minutes to register that we're full when we're eating or after we're eating. And so when we slow down our eating, we reduce the risk of overeating, because we can figure out, oh, this is my meal, this is what I'm going to eat, and then oh, now I'm actually full, instead of rushing through our meals. Now, the big one there, when we all think about portion control, I think, is that we think about our dinnerware size. And so we try to reduce our dinnerware size. That's a pretty good idea. I know they did this study where they found participants and they split them into two groups. Either you were given your dinner, which in this case was actually just pasta, and you were given a very large bowl to eat from, or a medium-sized bowl to eat from. And what they found is the participants that were given the large bowl of pasta tended to eat 77% more pasta than those that were just given the medium-sized bowl. And so maybe, by reducing our size of our bowls or our plates, we could actually just eat less food because I guess the actual food seems bigger on the plate itself. They also did a very similar study where they looked at just ice cream spoons. And so when participants were given a larger ice cream spoon or a larger bowl, they tended to eat more. So it was like over 30% with a larger bowl. So they would eat 30% more ice cream, or they would serve themselves 30% more ice cream. And when they were given a larger spoon, it was like I think a 15% increase in the amount of ice cream they just took to serve themselves. So you can see how the size of our cutlery or the size of our bowls or dishes can impact us. The last thing there that I want to talk about is just the plate method. And so if we just go back one slide, we'll see that a well-controlled portion size of plate looks like half of it being just vegetables and fruits and salads, a quarter of it being good quality protein, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later on in the session today, and a quarter of it being complex carbohydrates, which we just talked about a little bit earlier. Wonderful. All righty, and we'll continue on with the tour, and we'll just talk a little bit about different types of diets now. But what we're going to do is just kind of give an overview of the diets. I'm sure we have a couple of videos that will go more in depth with these diets, so you can kind of find those if any of these are interesting to you. And we'll talk about one that you should try to avoid first.
Okay, so the one that you should definitely try to avoid is the standard American diet, also known as SAD, or the current Western culture diet. Now, as Nurme have mentioned, there is a healthy breakdown of the amount of food that we should eat. Next slide, please. And that is shown on the left. Although it's a bit different from the graph that Nurme have showed, it essentially consists of the same type of macronutrients, just grouped a little more specific. So that the one on the left is the healthy breakdown, and the one on the right is the SAD breakdown. And although it's shown in different categories such as animal food, processed plant food, essentially what that breaks down to is 32%. So the blue part of the pie graph is animal food, and that includes things like meat, chicken, fish, cheese, which is in reality the amount of the amount of proteins and the amount of dairy food that you should be eating. The one on the right, the one in red, the hugest chunk, is made up of 57% of processed plant food, and these are usually like deep fried, baked food, and that contains high sodium and sugar, and even additives and preservatives. So these processed foods are not even like present in the healthy breakdown, but yet it makes up the massive majority of the food that we that is in the current SAD diet. And last bit, the yellow part is the whole grains part, the fruit, the vegetable, and the nuts part. So it's really the healthy part that should have made up the huge majority of the healthy diet, but yet in the standard American diet, it barely makes up to 11% of the diet. So SAD diet, as you can see, is really deviated from the healthy breakdown, and it's really something that really we should try to avoid. So what might happen if we just continue with a SAD diet, like with SAD? That leads to a lot of chronic diseases due to imbalance between nutrients, and these chronic diseases may include diabetes, being overweight, having certain cardiovascular diseases, or hypertension. The first two is typically, well, all four is caused by the mass amount of fat in the fat and unnecessary kind of nutrients that is incorporated in SAD, and they lead to a lot of health impact and complications, which currently and unfortunately a lot of Americans are experiencing. The other part with SAD is it also brings a lot of mental impacts. A few researchers have shown that being consistently on a SAD diet leads to impact of hippocampus, which is the part that is involved with memory formation. And so continuously eating the so-called junk food basically reduces your ability to memorize things. Continuously going on SAD also brings you at a higher risk for depression, bipolar disorders, as it also impacts other part of the brain, such as the entire limbic system. And also eating a lot of sugar, which is typically involved in SAD, makes you a lot more addictive to eating those junk food, and it also kind of makes you just eat a lot more than what you used to eat. And if you guys are interested on this topic, there's a really good documentary called Super Size Me that you guys may watch, or you can also wait for next webinar in sometime in the near future on other types of diet, as Nurme has mentioned.
Right, and so here kind of is like, what should we do then? And one of the ideas is to eat more whole food diets. And so a whole food diet is kind of when we avoid all the processed foods. So I know it just sounds a little confusing right now, and so what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of time to just explore this topic and talk about a couple of examples of processed foods and whole foods, and hopefully we can get an idea that way. So let's go to the next slide. What are these whole foods? Simply, it's just when you don't refine something. It's like when the ingredients aren't added to your foods. And so you can see it's more just like fruits and vegetables, nuts, whole grains, lean proteins, preferably for meat, fish, and eggs, things like that. So if we go to the next slide, we can see how how foods are usually processed and what that usually entails. So ways you can process foods are like you freeze them, you can them, you bake them, or you dry them. But the issue is that when certain foods are processed, usually a high level of salt, sugar, and fat are added. And if we go think about what Simon was talking about a little bit earlier, is that SAD, or that standard American diet, or that Western diet, that's the issue with it is that there's very high levels of salt, sugar, and fat, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Of course, you can definitely have healthy meals or healthy foods that are processed. So not all processed foods are unhealthy, but they tend to usually have this sort of issue of having a lot of added sugar or added salt or added fat. And we can give you an example. A lot of those fruit juices that we see that we think are healthy, or that we've maybe even grown up thinking are very, very healthy, tend to just be made of like concentrate of the fruit, but then have a lot of added sugar. And that's where the unhealthy part of that comes from. Of course, if we were to just juice an orange, just straight up juice an orange and drink that juice, although it's still processed, it's not as unhealthy. But that's the ideology of this sort of diet, where you just have a whole food diet, is you just avoid all that processing altogether. So we can look at an example of some of these processed foods, and so this is a bit more basic, but you can even see it's a lot of those cheese and bread and vegetables and soft drinks, things like that. Alrighty, we'll talk a little bit about a different type of diet here, where you might see a lot more unhealthy foods, or you might see a lot more different types of foods, and it's called the keto diet.
Yeah, for sure. So with the keto diet, it's mainly comprised of foods which fall into the fat macronutrients. So the ketogenic diet mostly consists of around 70% fat, 25% protein, and 5% carbs. So it is considered an extremely low carb diet. So what a meal on this diet may look like is an egg that was pan fried with olive oil, with an avocado and some tomato slices for breakfast, keeping in mind that this is a healthier meal that you may see on this diet. So this diet is used for a lot of purposes, with some of the most common goals being weight loss, lowering blood sugar, and managing conditions such as subtypes of epilepsy or other brain diseases. It has been proven to help out sometimes in those scenarios. And of course, with lowering blood sugar, if you are not consuming carbs, your blood sugar should stay in the normal range. But that does not necessarily mean this is a cure for diabetes, because if you started eating carbs again, your blood sugar would be the same as it was before. So the keto diet works by converting your body to burn fat instead of carbs. So when you're eating something like a sandwich for lunch, the carbs from the bread are converted into energy, and they're either consumed immediately. So if you go for a run immediately after, those carbs can be consumed, or if you do some form of exercise. But if not, it will usually be stored as fat or glycogen. And when you deprive the body of carbs, insulin secretion rates will go down, and your body will go through metabolic changes, which will make fat your source of energy. And this is called being in a state of nutritional ketosis. So there are a lot of pros and cons of this diet. It is a very controversial diet. And so some of the pros include that it has been proven to initiate significant weight loss, which makes sense because your body is relying on fat stores for energy. So it will be like consuming your fat, and that helps a lot with weight loss and just keeping you satiated, which helps with weight loss. It does help to lower blood sugar. Well, as I said, it can be very helpful if you have extremely high uncontrolled blood sugar, but it is not a cure for diabetes. So many people think that if they're on this diet, it is a cure for their diabetes, but that's not the case, unfortunately, because if you start eating carbs again, your sugars will go up again as well. The keto diet can also help with hormonal regulation in some cases. So especially in PCOS patients, they are more likely to experience insulin resistance. So lowering carbs can be beneficial in some cases like that. and of course leading to reduced hunger throughout the day and increasing energy levels in some cases. Now, as for the cons, it is a very unreasonable diet because they're asking you to cut out a whole food group, which can be very difficult to sustain for a long-term period. So a lot of people on the ketogenic diet will cut out fruits, except for a couple of rare fruits that are low on the glycemic index, and they'll also cut out grains. So avoiding carbs at such a drastic level is very difficult, and that might not be sustainable for the long term if you're looking at doing this diet long term. It can also cause some interesting effects. So one of these is called the keto flu phenomenon. So many people have experienced weird side effects of going through this metabolic change where your body converts instead of carbs, you're starting to convert fat. And it's actually called the keto flu, where you feel kind of groggy and even sick for the first little bit while you're on the diet as you're converting. So that can be a sign from your body, perhaps, that this may not be the right diet for you if you're feeling sick. There's also a large risk of developing nutritional deficiencies due to the lack of food groups. So you're cutting out food groups like most fruits, some vegetables like starchy vegetables, and grains. So you might become malnourished due to the very limited diversity in your diet, since it is a high fat diet where you'll primarily just be consuming fat. And of course, a big side effect is consuming too many unhealthy fats. So a lot of people get on this diet, and for breakfast, they might have some bacon, red meat, and all of these are not the greatest choice. As we know, saturated fat is not great. So ideally, somebody on this diet might have olive oil and avocado and nuts, but that's not always practical. And I think sometimes a lot of people might choose the unhealthy fats, which is definitely a con of the keto diet. Another one would definitely be the risk of developing kidney stones and having issues with your bowel system as well. So there is an associated risk of developing kidney stones due to the high fat consumption. And of course, since this diet is very low in carbs, that means it's also low in fiber, which can lead to some weird symptoms with your GI. And in my opinion, one of the biggest side effects is the lack of long-term studies and side effects noted. So there are not some great long-term studies other than the ones that are for epilepsy relating to a low-carb diet. But unfortunately, in terms of weight loss and blood sugar, there are not great studies that show how this could potentially affect your other health markers other than just your blood sugar or weight loss. And I think that's very important when making educated decisions to make sure that you're sticking to the research. So it would be great if they produce more long-term studies for the keto diet, and as it's increasing in popularity, I think that's likely. So how to know if the keto option is right for you? So I think the keto option can look very tempting because it does lead to some weight loss, and if that's what you're looking for, that can definitely be beneficial, and this can be a tool. I think in order to know how this diet can be sustainable for you and how to know if it's right for you is to make it sustainable. So be reasonable with your diet so it can be sustainable for a long period of time. So being on an extremely high fat, low carb diet might not be sustainable for a long period of time. And if you do end up losing weight and then reverting back to the standard diet, that could lead to even more weight gain. So it's important to be reasonable starting out just to make sure that you're not going to lose a large portion of weight and then reverse and gain it back. It's also important to maintain a good understanding of updated research to ensure you are following an optimal diet. So a good way of staying on top of research is to watch these webinars as well. We always try to put in good research, so that will help ensure that you're following the optimal diet. And just making sure that you're following the research to see what diet is best, because at the end of the day, it is important to stick with the science and see what can actually improve health markers in your diet. And of course, weighing the pros and cons. So weighing the pros and cons we just talked about will be important. And speaking to your doctor before making any drastic changes like this. So the ketogenic diet can be a very drastic change, and you don't want to do something that could potentially worsen any pre-existing conditions. So speaking with someone who knows your health well is a really good idea, and trying not to fall for gimmick diets you may see in the media. So although the ketogenic diet does have some good weight loss, it also is a bit unsustainable just due to the lack of nutrition and the lack of food groups in the diet. So it's important to make sure that you're following the sustainable diet, even if you're trying to lose weight or lower your blood sugars, and not falling for some of the gimmicks that we may see where people lose a very large amount of weight in a small period of time. So going back to the basics is always a good idea.
So now we're going to touch upon the Mediterranean diet. So what is the Mediterranean diet? So the Mediterranean diet is a healthy eating plan. It's plant-based and incorporates the traditional flavors and cooking methods of Greece, Italy, and other countries that border the Mediterranean Sea. So numerous studies have shown that the Mediterranean diet can promote weight loss and help prevent heart attacks, strokes, type 2 diabetes, and premature death. It has also been associated with improvements in blood lipid profiles, especially in LDL cholesterol and triglycerides, decreased oxidation of lipids, and decreased risk of thrombosis. So one study compared the effects of the Mediterranean diet to a low-fat diet and reported that the Mediterranean diet was more effective at slowing the progression of plaque buildup in the arteries, which is a major risk factor for heart disease. So for this reason, the Mediterranean diet is often recommended for those looking to improve their health and protection against chronic disease. So the Mediterranean diet puts a higher focus on plant foods and than many other diet types. So foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes are main ingredients in meals and snacks. So how to follow the Mediterranean diet? The Mediterranean diet encourages a variety of nutrient-dense foods, including fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and heart-healthy fats. So following this eating pattern may help stabilize blood sugar levels and protection against type 2 diabetes. So interestingly, multiple studies have found that the Mediterranean diet can reduce fasting blood sugar levels and improve levels of hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker used to measure long-term blood sugar control. The Mediterranean diet also has been shown to decrease insulin resistance as well, which is a condition that impairs the body's ability to use insulin to regulate blood sugar levels effectively. So just to reiterate, make sure you eat vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, potatoes, whole grains, herbs, spices, fish, seafood, and extra virgin olive oil, and eat in moderation, poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, and then eat rarely red meats, sugar-sweetened beverages, added sugars, processed meat, refined grains, refined oil, and other highly processed foods. Now, to quickly go over some pros and cons of the Mediterranean diet. Some pros include, as I mentioned before, it promotes heart health, it supports diabetes prevention and management. Several studies show that the Mediterranean diet could be beneficial for brain health as well, and may even protect against cognitive decline as you get older. For example, one study including 512 people found that greater adherence to the Mediterranean diet was associated with improved memory and reductions in several risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Additionally, it has been linked to helping in weight management and reducing inflammatory markers. And then to look at some cons include some foods can be expensive. Some of the dietary restrictions can be challenging. There is some alcohol intake that is permitted. So wine is often associated with the Mediterranean diet, but it can only be included in moderation. And another con is it may fall short on some nutrients. So there's 20%, it's 20% shorter on protein compared to the standard American diet.
Perfect. We'll finish our conversation here with one of the other types of diet here. It's called the plant-based diet. We'll go to the next slide and kind of understand what is the plant-based diet. I know that this image on the left there is a little small, but we'll break it down. So whenever I talk about the plant-based diet with people, the question always comes up like, oh, isn't that just what vegan is? Or isn't that just what like whole food is? And so I think it's nice to start by figuring out what is included and what is not included in all these different types of diets. So if we start off with the vegan diet, basically you can't eat anything that has any meat or seafood or egg or dairy products or poultry products. So anything that comes from an animal. A plant-based diet is a little bit different in the sense that you're trying to avoid those foods, but everything else is okay. And the difference between a plant-based diet and a whole food plant-based diet is that the whole food plant-based diet will also avoid oils and highly processed foods, like those refined sweeteners or like white rice, things like that. And so, you might be wondering, okay, what can I eat or what should I eat? The goal here is now to kind of focus a bit more on fruits, veggies. They call them tubers, but they're basically also just different types of vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And so just a good mix of all of these different things will definitely help you feel full and get all the foods that you want to eat. Now we might be thinking, okay, what are the pros and what are the cons for a meal like this or a diet like this? Some of the biggest pros are now with all the healthy foods that you're eating, there is a very significant association with cholesterol reduction, increased cardiovascular health, especially because of that cholesterol reduction. There's also a good amount of research which relates weight reduction and this type of diet, and also type 2 diabetes prevention and remission. Now, the common argument that's made against this type of diet is that it's an incomplete protein source. And you might hear this a lot. So let's kind of break down what that means. When people say an incomplete protein source, what they're really referring to is like the amino acids. And so it is true that meats are usually one of the only things that will give you all 9 of your essential amino acids. This plant-based diet, a lot of the plant-based foods won't give you all 9, so you might get like 7 or you might get 8 from a particular food, but you can counteract that with good planning. So say there is something that you might not be getting from some meal, maybe you can counteract that with another meal by focusing on other foods that might have those amino acids. The other thing there is that there are some deficiencies for micronutrients and vitamins. So big one there, the really popular one is vitamin B12, but other ones like iron, I've heard of iron or calcium, things like that, also can be related to this diet. And with that, it's good to just check if supplementation would be right for you. Again, for example, for me, being vegetarian, something I do take is vitamin B12, just so I don't have that deficiency. Perfect. But I hope that was a good summary of all these different types of diets that exist. If you do have any questions, feel free to definitely email us at drcurnew232@gmail.com, and we'll definitely be able to reply back with our thoughts, Dr. Curnew's thoughts, and all of those. Daniel, do we have any questions from the live chat there?
It doesn't look like it at the moment. I guess we can wrap things up with some final thoughts if you don't mind. I actually have one or two, because
Go for it. Yeah.
it honestly, like, my biggest takeaway that I found. Oh, Dr. Curnew, did you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you for this wonderful talk. I'm just at the airport checking in, so I'm going to put myself on mute.
Okay.
I'm going to Iceland. I'm going to eat a plant-based week. I'm going to work on exercise. I'm going to try to follow this advice. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll just listen in.
Perfect.
All righty, wonderful. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dr. Curnew.
Safe travels.
Yeah, but honestly, it was I found my biggest takeaway, and what I found really interesting, you guys, was if we go back to the slide on the different plate sizes. I actually didn't know that dinnerware size actually, influenced their eating habits. And what's really interesting is, as like a lot of you guys might have done so as well, like I moved back into Hamilton into my student home because classes started up this week. And the plates at my student house are a lot bigger than the plates at my home. And I found,
Interesting.
now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I felt like I actually did eat a lot more over this past week in terms of lunches and dinners compared to, I did at home. And I feel like that's because it's I feel like there's some I feel compelled to like fill the size of the plate with food, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
it's just I really related to this particular tidbit because I didn't actually know that, so I
yeah.
found that really interesting.
If you think about it, next time you go to a buffet restaurant, like look at the sizes of those plates, and
Hmm.
then look at the serving like utensils that they give you. And chances are you'll notice that the size of the plates is usually smaller than at like a normal a la carte restaurant. And also the utensils that they give you aren't as effective when you're trying to pile foods on to your plate.
Mm,
For foods that are expensive, then foods that are easy to fill up on and cheap, like rice, it'll be like a really easy utensil to use. But then, like like that chicken leg or that piece of steak is going to be really small, and also it's going to be really hard for you to pile on. So it's interesting to think about things that way as well.
yeah. But no, that was just I found that I was like I very much relate to that, and I learned something new today.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I guess does anyone else have any other thoughts, any reflections, you guys?
No, that was everything on my end.
Okay. But I guess that being said, we'll wrap things up. I hope you guys all enjoyed our webinar tonight, and have a great weekend and have a great night, you guys.